every year there's a certain set of expectations that teams have coming into the season. Of course, playing on the Power Five level, playing on the SEC level, you want to put yourself in a position to win championships every single year. However, every now and then we just have to be realistic. Once again, it's Case to the GOAT for Vernon Speak Sports, mostly talking about Auburn football and the rest of the SEC. Want to give a shout out to my fearless and true gang, War Eagle. Now, as we go into this 2019 season, there's a certain level of expectation that the Auburn Tigers have coming into this season. And I would think to be competitive, obviously, to win a certain amount of games. We're going to talk about that later on in the video, and to win the winnables. And we're going to talk about that later on in the video. But first, we're going to do some kind of historical analysis of the Auburn Tigers, and we're going to use the last 10 years as a sample size. In the last 10 years, when you look at all the games won, all the games lost, when you do an average of wins and losses between 2009 and now, the last 10 years, you are looking at a 8.6 and 4.6 margin. So that means Auburn wins about 8.4% of 8.6% of their games and lose about 4.6 of those games. So they basically go between 8-5 and 9-4. That's been the trend for the last 10 years. Now, sandwich that, sandwich that with a couple of seasons that really distort this thing. One, you have a very, very unlikely 3-9 season in 2012. Very uncharacteristic for Auburn to fall that far out of the mix. Okay, no SEC wins that year. Probably one of the worst losses in recent history to Texas A&M, 63-21 in Jordan-Hare Stadium, might I add. Then you factor in the national championship year, 14-0. That's one of those big years for the Auburn Tigers win-wise. So that kind of helped, solidify having that, because you take away the 14-0 season, then you definitely have an even more dismal win-to-loss ratio for the Auburn Tigers. Now, usually I don't give Auburn a pass, but I'm going to give Auburn a pass. I'm going to take the 3-9 season out, because that goes on the very far end of the low-end trend for the Auburn Tigers. So when I take that 3-9 season out, we're looking at now Auburn winning about 9.3 games a year and losing about 4.3 games a year. So that's basically we'll say about 3.8 games a year. So that's basically saying Auburn should go, based on the average, 9-3 every year based on those types of numbers. Now, what I want you all to understand, that there's a huge difference between an expectation and a goal. Okay. Now, expectation is something that you kind of sort of can guarantee is going to happen. Every business does this. They have expectations and they have goals. The goals stretch the expectations, because based on the numbers given, you would think that Auburn on average would go 9-3, 8-4, somewhere around there in the regular season. But then you have that goal. You have that goal of about 10 or 11, or maybe even some things going your way, having an undefeated season. And that's kind of sort of where we are with the Auburn Tigers. So when I look at going into this season, and I look at the trends, even if you really look at the undefeated season at 14-0 with Cam Newton, you still have a lot of unsustainable activity that went on in that game. You look at the game against Clemson. How often do you miss field goals within the 20-yard lines for the Clemson Tigers? How often do you miss a wide open receiver in overtime that would have put the game away? You got to look at things like that. Also, you look at the comeback against Alabama. Those things are just not sustainable. You're normally not going to win games in that fashion. Also, they had a couple of close games with Mississippi State and Kentucky. Those games could have gone either way. So with that ball bouncing a different way, you're right back to the 9-4, 8-4 trend when we go to the 2013 season. A lot of things took place. They during the regular season lost one game to LSU. That was obvious. LSU won that game, pretty soundly. Auburn made a pretty nice comeback at the end, but fell short 35-21. Then you have the very unlikely victory, which kind of set the tone that had everyone believing, victory over Texas A&M 45-41. That game could have went either way. They had the last-second win against Mississippi State. And then that's two losses right there. That's just assuming the ball bounces another way. That's two losses right there. Then going into Alabama and Georgia. How many times is it going to happen to where you can win off of a prayer and Jordan Hare? That's not sustainable. Appreciate the win, but it's just not sustainable. The kick six against Alabama, just not sustainable. So when you look at even in the high-end years for the Auburn Tigers, there were a lot of things that happened that just weren't sustainable, that just won't, get you to that next level. Now, we've already established that the expectation for the Auburn Tigers, just numerically speaking, is 9-3. Okay, we're just going to leave it right there. Now, the goal for the Auburn Tigers. When I look back at the 2018 season, I saw a lot of ways that Auburn could actually reach their goals. And it's really little intangibles that Auburn can take advantage of to put themselves in that upper echelon of college football. Number one, Auburn has to do a lot better this season with time of possession. In the high consequence games, like we'll just use Alabama and Georgia and LSU, for example, in the mid to low 20s, 18 even against Georgia. That's just not really going to help you win on a consistent level. You have to be able to have some type of focus and control over the time of possession. Another thing was red zone scoring. Auburn last year, they could score in the red zone, but didn't score as many touchdowns as they needed to score. You look at Alabama, they were 68% scoring touchdowns in the red zone, whereas Auburn was 60. Now that 8%, that's a lot of points left on the table, which will tell on you in a big game, kind of like, say, Tennessee. Inside the red zone several times. As a matter of fact, they kicked the field goal from the 3-yard line, which just shows, that's basically a huge defensive stop for Tennessee. So you look at the red zone scoring, that's something that has to change for Auburn to have a more sustainable program. Also, I dissected a lot of film, and I saw some things that really hurt them in the red zone is very, very low percentage play calling at the beginning of the down and distance. You go, you 1st and 10 in the, inside the 20, but then you run a jet sweep and you either only gain 2 yards or you might lose some. So you're already behind the chains. And as the closer you get to the end zone, it makes those passing windows very narrow to where you can hardly fit the ball in there. And two, your running plays become very predictable when you get behind the down and distance closer to the end zone. So that's another thing Auburn has to get better at, is scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Now, another thing that I looked at is, in order to be more sustainable, Auburn has to have better linebacker play, especially on the edge. Now, right there in the interior line where they have a lot of help from the defensive linemen, Auburn's linebackers played fairly decently, but I just haven't been impressed with the linebacker play really in the Gus Malzahn era. I mean, even with, Trey Williams, these guys have just not been elite yet. But I do feel like this year Auburn has a chance with Michael Harris, with KJ Britt, with Zacoby McClain, Owen Pappo. All of those guys have the opportunity to give Auburn some type of elitism at that linebacker position to help get Auburn to that goal of 10 games, that goal of 11 games that they wish to achieve, to put themselves in a position late in the season to make some type of fight for the college football playoffs, the SEC championship, all of those different goals. But the linebacker play definitely has to improve this year. So we believe with, Kenny Dillingham, coming to the helm, we believe that Auburn will be better just by default on offense because Gus Malzahn will be calling plays. We do know that the quarterback will be a dual threat quarterback, so that's going to help with the sustainability because Gus Malzahn calling plays with a dual threat quarterback is huge for his program. So that's all Auburn is looking for. The goal 9 games, the expectation 9 games, the goal 10 to 11 games with an opportunity to make it into the SEC championship. Once again, it's K-Sue to go for Vernon Speaks Sports, mostly talking about Auburn football and the rest of the SEC. Want to give a shout out to my fearless and true gang, War Eagle.